Hey, everyone, and welcome to the Product Builders Podcast. This is your host, Mark Garcia, and joining me on the show today is James Smet. James is a senior product designer at Vagaro, an online booking, payment processing, and business management software for salons, spas, and fitness studios. James, great having you on the show today. How is everything going?
It's going great. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, I'm excited as well. We're going to be talking about design systems today, which is a topic and conversation that I've personally been wanting to dive into. But before we get there, let's start off with some basics. Could you go ahead, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, I'm a senior product designer at Vagaro. And yeah, a little bit about my background is, I grew up in Southern California, came to the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, that is, for school at San Jose State. Graduated with a graphic design degree and a minor in some business and photography. So definitely wanted to pursue the creative pursuits. Um, and yeah, the Bay Area had a lot to offer in terms of, being fresh out of college, working at some startups. I did some contract jobs as a graphic designer. And then ultimately landed up at a telemedicine startup called Doctor on Demand, as a graphic designer on the marketing team. And that's, when I got that startup life, culture, exposure. And it was a small team, small company at the time. And so, I was on the graphic design team and looking over at these product designers, and it looked like they were really, accomplishing a lot of cool problems, working through a lot of intricate features. And so I got a lot of exposure to them and what they were doing. And that's when it really got my, wheels turning on product design and, using that artistic expression, but in a different way. It combined a lot of, psychology and data. And so, yeah, I ultimately worked with some product designers there, kind of worked on some small product design projects, and then moved on to Vagaro, where I'm at currently. Been here for about 4 years, maybe going on five. And yeah, it's been great. Like you said, Vagaro is a business solution software in the beauty, wellness, fitness industries. Um, and it's great because we design experiences for business owners to start, manage, grow their business, and ultimately, give them time that they would otherwise be using for, business administration stuff and the humdrum of running a business, and free that time up for them to focus on their passions and pursue what they love and what they want to make a living from. So um, there's a lot of complexity with that, and we help manage that at Vagaro. And there's a lot of that complexity of running a business that we, give the tools and offer services to power their business. So um, we do some things like customer booking is kind of really what we're built on, accepting payments. So get paid as a business, paying your employees, so payroll, employee management, customer management, the marketing to the customers, the reporting aspects of business, inventory management. It's just kind of scratching the surface. So it's a super powerful and robust software. And it serves two audiences, like I mentioned, the business owners, but then we have a marketplace for the customers of these businesses to find and book an appointment with these. So it's a challenge every day to kind of balance the needs of the business and the needs of the customer. But it's really exciting, and we work on a lot of fun, you know, complicated stuff here.
Awesome. Thank you for that intro. You answered a whole bunch of other questions I had lined up. So perfect. And
All
also your
right.
background, very similar to mine. I started off in graphic design and basically have done every other type of design in between there to product design. So it's been a journey myself, and I definitely feel the challenges I'm sure you face along the way of taking that creative side and putting it towards this product design side. Speaking of product design and your role, can you tell me a little bit about what your responsibilities are and what your day to day might look like as a product designer at Vagaro?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so like I said, there's a lot of intricate problems to solve. And so the everyday is looking at a roadmap of features that we want to build out, balancing the forward looking features that we're working on to innovate, but also the maintenance aspect. And so I'd say I balance most of my time as a feature designer. And so that being, we're a relatively small team. We wear a lot of hats on the product design team. So we'll get that initiative and to build out, fill in the blank feature, and, I'll serve as the researcher, kind of understanding the problem, understanding the background of, any given issue. I'll be that designer who, works through and iterates on problems. I'll be the prototyper to deliver on some higher fidelity flows for feedback. We'll lead brainstorm sessions and workshops to, again, get to the root of solving for that problem. And also kind of playing a little bit of a PM role. So you get a lot of exposure for, to cross-functional teams. The engineering teams obviously is a good, relationship to have, to the sales, the support teams, the marketing teams. There's a lot of communication and a lot of, all hands on deck vibes here. So, there's that aspect of my role as a feature designer. But then, what we'll get into is design systems, and that's something that kind of came organically, and we'll talk about it a bit more. But seeing a need for systems and design systems within the team and the organization, and so I've kind of carved out a role for myself as leading that design system effort here, and being that advocate and being that champion for it. So it's balancing, pushing the system forward, but also pushing our products and features forward as well.
That's awesome. And we can take that opportunity to start digging into the meat of this conversation. So we're talking about design systems. Some people might not be aware of what exactly that means. Can you just give like a high level definition of what exactly is a design system?
Yeah, I think, like you said, some people might not even know what it is. Some people might, have an idea of what it is, and I'm sure if you ask many different folks, you'll get a variety of different answers. Some might say it's a list of all buttons and components within a software. It's the design principles that kind of govern our team. It's the design tokens. It's UX guidelines and development guidelines. It's maybe templates and workflows, and so there's a lot that goes into it. And the simple answer is it's all of these. It's a culmination of all of these facets of an organization or process workflow, or the tools that go into creating a product into this system. And so Danella Meadows has a great book called Thinking in Systems that defines the system as consisting of three things: the elements, interconnections, and a function or purpose. And, a lot of things are systems, right? I played volleyball. The volleyball team is a system. The forest is a system in nature. And so there's just systems all around us. But bringing it back into the context of design and everything, how that applies to design systems is, the elements that I speak to are the visual identity, the branding, the color palette, the typography that's used, the spacing. It's the tools that we use as developers and designers, like Figma. It's a snippet library, a reference library for us to, have the documentation on, and for developers to grab snippets from. There's great examples of Pinterest Gestalt system, Shopify's Polaris system. So those are the elements. The interconnections are like the workflows and the process and the everyday. And then the purpose that it all comes together, to serve is, it could be based on a business goal. It could be based on a product need, but overall we're aligning ourselves and aligning these different pieces of the puzzle, to, ultimately the business goal or KPI of, increased revenue, customer retention, fill in the blank. And kind of one final thought on that is that it's, a way to capture a decision or a way of problem solving. In that, every day as a team, you are trying to work through scenarios and problems that you encounter and solve for them over and over again. And that can get pretty taxing if you're just solving for the same problem over and over. But design systems allow us to use all of these elements and interconnections to solve for that problem once, and continue to slowly, improve on that solution over time, rather than trying to, reinvent the wheel every time you get a project initiative or trying to solve for a problem.
Very thorough answer. You already kind of touched on, I was going to ask, I think when people talk about design systems, let's say a misconception, if you will, is that it is just buttons and components and visual design aspects, right? And I think that's part of it. My question, which you've answered, was what else exists in the design system outside of visuals? And so you've talked about things like workflows, templates, etc. So I assume, tell me what it looks like. Is it a lot of documentation that goes on top of the visuals and how things kind of work together?
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of a combination of all of those things. That can kind of sound quite taxing and tedious to say it's just a lot of documentation, but I think a lot of it is creating that shared language and creating a culture, really, that then can radiate into the rest of the business. And um, it is documentation. It is the alignment on a consistent language for designers and developers, right? If we're referencing the same thing but using different language in terms of a drop down or a menu or something, that can cause a lot of confusion, a lot of churn, a lot of feedback. And so that documentation of a process, documentation of a component, really eliminates that back and forth. Um, and yeah, that kind of tedious work and the day to day kind of cognitive load of guessing, or hey, is this the right thing, or are we using this right component in this correctly in this scenario? A lot of that can just be squashed by having some sort of system. It could be starting out small, it could be a fully fleshed out enterprise solution, but having that really just allows designers and developers to just kind of not think of those small things and focus on the bigger initiatives.
That's awesome. And you mentioned at your organization, at least, you are the champion of the design system. So, a big question I had is, what are indicators that someone, some organization or team might need to implement a design system? And maybe you can speak from the experience you've had at Vagaro. What kind of pointed you to saying, hey, this is something that we need. We need to invest the time into it. And ultimately, it'll be more efficient for us down the line.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was a fun problem to kind of to overcome. I think it was somewhat easy to say that we kind of needed one in terms of we were all feeling the pain points but couldn't articulate it. And that was on a day-to-day level as designers and the team. Um, Dealing with, we were a small team. So luckily we were able to sit right next to each other. And there was a lot of, hey, is this the right input? Are we using the right drop down? Or, hey, within Figma, do we have a component for this? Or am I trying to create something new? And so a lot of the design feedback and in these reviews that we would have was we're kind of having a lot of the same conversation. And so I kind of took it upon myself to say, hey, we have this great tool, Figma, that we were all learning at the time. And, it really enabled us to use that tool to create that UI kit. So it started small. It didn't come as, the full aspiration of having this fully, decked out, fully documented, specced out system. It started small. And so that happened at the designer level. And at the developer level, we were also seeing some of the same, questions and the same thing. So, um, getting feedback or getting a demo from development, we're seeing things where it's like, that doesn't quite look right. Let's point to this source of truth. And so, yeah, starting to create that source of truth eliminated a lot of the pain points, allowed us to work a lot faster and more decisively. Um, and so, that then carried the momentum over into trying to align that initiative for a design system to a business goal. And it just kind of was a perfect merging of scenarios where the business was really focused on wanting to implement color accessibility. And so with that, I did kind of some research on how can systems help here. Design tokens was a great avenue to pursue. And so I pitched this future idea of a roadmap for implementing color and accessibility being included in that. And I was able to point to what existed already is, hey, we've kind of done this at a micro level on the designer and developer, part of our process. I think we can do this in a way that we can work quicker. It might take a little bit of time up front, but ultimately we're going to be creating this machine, this pattern, this template, and foundation that will allow us to implement this and work quicker. And so, that, when you're speaking in terms of the business, saying things like cost savings or working faster, even increasing revenue and customer satisfaction because you're creating a better product, that excites the business. And, I think that's key and was key in my experience here to be able to get that time and the resources allocated to a system at Vagaro.
So you mentioned something I wanted to touch on in terms of why this would be impactful for a business. And of course, business goals, obviously a huge one in getting some executive buy-in into investing in this. Were there any key KPIs or is that KPIs or metrics that you had to keep in mind as you implemented the system that both affected the work you were doing and guided the system as it grew? Were there things that you had to report back on, things that the business wanted to see in terms of ROI there?
Yeah, I think in short, it was is yes and no. We moved really quickly here, and so a lot of it was like, latching on to, all right, we're going to move quickly. Like, I think that's great. We'll give you the green light. But as part of that, I did want to back up, what that meant, and continue to be able to champion the system. So, looking at the implementation of the system, how many people are using these components? When we use the components, how much feedback in a demo type of process where, designers design something, we hand it off to development with the requirements. Development gives us a demo of that. You know, what does that process look like? What does that time to kind of close that loop look like? It started out anecdotally of, we were all kind of looking around and saying, oh, that was a lot smoother than we thought. Um, then it kind of looked into, we use Asana to project manage. And so it was how many tickets are we kind of getting relating to UI versus just more functionality. So that was a big thing. And I think that's something that resonated a lot with, just the culture here was, all right, we're moving quickly. We're becoming efficient. And yeah, it kind of built that snowball of not resisting against, implementing a system wide approach here. And yeah, we've kind of been really baking that into our process ever since.
That's cool. And sounds like it benefited the company quite a bit since you've implemented it. I wanted to dig into a bit about the benefits of implementing a design system, but actually first, you touched on this idea of working with the devs and having them collaborate with the designers. And I feel like oftentimes in product design, the design and development collaboration is where things can maybe get little iffy, where things fall apart. So, what was that process like in terms of getting this kind of cross team collaboration to build this one source of truth? Was there issues there? Was there some sort of process you implemented to help facilitate this design system? What was that like for you?
Yeah, it was understanding, putting your design hat on, understanding who the end user is. And, when you're building a feature, it's the end consumers of your product, of your software. For this in the system, the end users are the designers and developers. So it was relatively easy to kind of always keep that in mind. As product designers, you're always kind of empathy forward. You're always looking at the end user. What are their needs? And so um, it was a lot of just kind of spreading this idea of, hey, we've done this as designers, developers. Hey, we want to kind of implement a change. It wasn't an approach of, hey, we're all going to do this. It wasn't a mandate. It was creating that alignment towards the benefits, understanding why we should do this, um, getting folks on board. I think that, we're all kind of now speaking the same language and aligning towards that mission of the system. Um, and so it was gathering feedback and insight, making sure that we are establishing a relationship with developers, our counterparts. It shouldn't be a designers go in a silo and then they emerge with a product and a spec sheet and requirements and documentation, and then they hand it off to developers who are kind of free to interpret it as they want. So it was baking them into the process a bit more, understanding like what are some components that are commonly used, what are some ways that you develop that we can kind of latch onto and see, is this an opportunity to improve or work together towards creating that source of truth. So yeah, very much a collaborative process.
And so you started talking about earlier some of the benefits of implementing them. One, we just spoke about, right? Improved collaboration. You've talked about creating this one source of truth for consistency across your product, especially as you begin to scale and update features. You did say something that I loved was that you were able to solve a problem once and not have to resolve the same problem again, which is great. In your process of implementing a design system, has there ever been a point where you've been surprised by a benefit of just like, hey, we've had this design system in place, and you're like, oh man, did not expect that to happen, but that's awesome that it did. Have there been moments of surprise since you've implemented this at your organization?
Yeah, I think it really was the um, kind of like qualitative data that we gathered from this is I was so focused on trying to implement something and working with others and what is the maybe best way to do something or, how can we improve? And so I was kind of heads down on that and, you know, talking to these folks that I work with on the everyday day to day basis who consume the system. I took it for granted how kind of it would benefit them. And so, through surveys or user interviews, or even just, side conversations in the hall, hearing of, oh, I love that I'm able to just work faster, or I like that it's just easier to find what I need. Or, I'm glad that we're doing this because, it's allowing me to just kind of work on a different aspect of the feature. And, as we started to grow as a team, I was seeing that and hearing that a bit more. Whereas, when one person would join, it was a lot of the kind of catching them up to speed. And, as more people were joining, it was, hey, we've kind of got something. Get yourself familiar with it. Let's talk about it. Let's educate you on it. And, take it and run with it rather than kind of a really intense hand holding process. And so, yeah, it was great to see that the efforts that we put forth were being rewarded as feedback.
Feel like it can get really easy as a product designer, developer, whatever part of the piece you're working on to kind of get stuck in your hole and just kind of be heads down with your blinders on, doing your work and forgetting that there are other people that you need to collaborate with to
Yeah.
have a successful end product. So that's great feedback for you to hear and anecdotes. Um, how long has it been since you first started implementing this system to today? Like, how long have you been growing this design system at your org?
Yeah, it's been, I'd say, since 2021. And I can't believe it's 2024 already. So, going on 3 years. And it's been a journey. We're far from being done. There's definitely a roadmap that we have in place and aspirations. Um, and I think this is what I would say to many folks who are trying to start out is it's a small step by step process, and that's what it was for us. It started with a Figma UI kit, and it's been growing into design tokens, and that's really been a focus for us. And it's going to continue to grow and evolve. Documentation is something that still kind of exists in the ether, and we're working on getting that down. But yeah, I think it's almost like job security in a way of like, we all see the benefits. We can really utilize this in this organization, and yeah, there's always going to be a need for it.
Love that advice that you gave in terms of if you're looking to start this for the first time, how can you do that? And starting small, great advice. I feel like when I've looked at
Absolutely.
design systems, you see all of these robust things that have been built out by other people, and it can feel really overwhelming in terms of like, where do I even start? So starting small, starting with your first basic need, great advice for people.
Yeah.
On that note, in terms of advice, are there any other resources or tools that individuals or businesses interested in learning more about design systems, systems thinking, implementing this at their business? Are there places and resources they can go to get that going and learn more about it if they want to?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, in terms of kind of getting into that systems mindset, I spoke about a great book by Donella Meadows, Thinking in Systems. I think that's just a great foundational education on what it means to be thinking in systems. Um, there's a lot of great podcasts out there. Obviously, the Product Builders podcast is something everyone should listen to. If you're looking into design system specific podcasts, there's a great podcast called Design System Podcast. Um, and then I would say there's thought leaders in the space: Dan Mall, Brad Frost, Josh Clark, Gina Ann. These are all folks who, I haven't had the privilege of getting to know personally, but I've benefited a lot from their output. Um, stay hungry in terms of reading what's out there, reading what these folks have to say. What are the trends? Keep an eye out for conferences and talks. There's a design system Slack channel as well. So, yeah, lots of different opportunities to stay connected. Design systems, I think, is really taking hold, and a lot of people are talking about it. So it's there's a lot out there.
That's awesome. And equally important, I think, is as you get into it, we also have to consider, right, what are some of the challenges that you might be able to preemptively think about? So, in your 3-year journey since starting this, have you come across any challenges that businesses or people can kind of get ahead of as they start thinking about this work? Are there common challenges and issues that people should be aware of?
Yeah, I think the communication aspect and collaboration can be a challenge. I think, like you mentioned, it's easy for us to kind of like be focused on what we're working on individually or as a team. Um, and yeah, design systems are something that is open source. It's for the people of the organizations, for everyone to benefit from. So, really having an advocate, whether it's yourself or, getting a group of folks in, your organization to really speak to and evangelize and champion the benefits, I'd say it goes a long way. In addition to that would be putting in the small daily steps of constantly kind of improving on a system. Here at Vagaro, I don't have the benefit of dedicating 100% of my time to it. So the time that I do spend is, I look forward to, and, I want to chip away and work towards that end goal of a more robust system. Um, and so, yeah, I think that challenge is, it's easy to maybe think that you've kind of got something in place and it can sit and just work for you. Um, Again, it's an iterative process. It's always growing. There's always room for improvement. And there's always room to scale. So that challenge of staying hungry and pushing that forward will benefit everyone.
James, you are really teeing up my questions today, so this is perfect.
I love it.
You mentioned that you don't have per se the 100% bandwidth to just dedicate yourself to building a design system. So one of my follow-up questions was regarding maintenance. Obviously, you build a design system, but that's not just a set and forget it. What can you say about maintenance? How much effort does it take? How can you continue to push an org to not only start it, but to continue to invest the time into it so that it scales and that it stays relevant, right? It's really probably easy to start it, forget about it, and within 6 months, it's already a bit outdated. So, what I guess advice or challenges have you experienced that you can impart in terms of maintaining a design system initiative?
Definitely. The democratization of the system is huge. I think getting folks to really feel like they're a part of it. This is not something for one person or one team to own. The more people you bring in and the more processes in place that you have to have a contribution model to this system will help that maintenance piece seem less daunting for maybe that one champion, right? If everyone is kind of collectively having it in the back of their head of systems thinking, right? How does what I'm doing or applying in this context of a feature, how does this exist more broadly in the system at Vagaro, at your company? That will always kind of keep those wheels turning and will allow the feedback and the communication between the champion and the team to keep that momentum moving forward for sure.
Awesome. That is great advice. And I love the idea of getting everyone involved, making everyone a stakeholder, and keeping this thing as up to date as possible. So that makes a lot of sense. And so, in researching for today's episode, I was just looking up a few things, and one of the things I came across online were just common myths about design systems. So, I kind of noted three here. I'm going to ask you what you feel about them. Just would love to hear your thoughts. So, the first myth I pulled up was design systems are just for large companies. How do you feel about that? Is that a true statement? Do small companies benefit from implementing this type of thing? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah. Just thinking of Mythbusters, that I think that myth is busted, right? There's no such thing as only for a huge company. I think that's the amazing thing about a design system is it's that collection of elements, and those can exist on such a small scale. And like I said, like anecdotally, that's how we started out. We were a small company, we were a small team, and we immediately saw those benefits of just, focusing on one area, which was that Figma component UI pattern and documentation. So, yeah, it could sound very overwhelming and, I can't do this because there's so much involved. And I think, that myth is definitely something that should be questioned, and, you can always start small.
I love that answer. And when I started getting into product design and also had to start thinking in systems design, I was very overwhelmed. And I always had the thought of, I am not a large Fortune 500 company. I'm not building this crazy product. Probably wouldn't benefit for me. But now that I've been in the industry for a while, I think anyone can benefit. Again, if you start small, great advice to have there.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Second myth I'd love your thoughts on design systems stifle creativity. How do you feel about that? I feel when people think about design systems and having things so documented, they feel like they can't think outside of the box. So, what are your
Yeah.
thoughts on creativity within design systems?
That's definitely a topic of debate, or I think one that is a natural question to bring up. If I'm working within the confines of this rigorous structure, how am I able to do what I need to do and innovate and create? And I think the answer to that is, that can be the common misconception, but it's absolutely, in my opinion, I'm a little biased, the opposite. It should be enabling more creativity because it's a tool. The design system is a tool in your toolkit. And like I said, if we're constantly trying to innovate and create that problem over and over, we're taking so much of our time and energy focusing on repeating or trying to innovate on something again and again. But if we can kind of focus on, let's take accessibility and colors, for example, you know, I can have that create that guideline and that system once. And now I can apply that. I can use this color palette. I can use these components that are accessible, that do meet the guidelines, that are consistent. And it's just kind of think of a Lego set, right? If I'm kind of working with some pre-built things, I can take these Lego pieces and still build something that's completely new and different, all while maintaining the foundation and structure. So it's a tool to be used to your advantage for sure.
Thank you. That was a great answer. And I'm going to pull up my third myth here. Uh, all right, here we go. Third one. The people who work with design systems, designers, all they do all day is build components. We've already kind of talked about this a bit, but would love your thoughts there, even though it's something we have touched on.
Yeah. That is, I mean, it's unavoidable. You're going to have to build some products, build some components. But I'd say that's kind of more in the upfront aspect of the effort and time. But once these components are built, they'll need to be maintained every once in a while, and that may take a couple minutes or an hour out of your week or something. Um, but once they're there, and you can use those then kind of in the same way that we're challenging the does it stifle creativity. It's well, these are the tools to use, and they're established, and now I can kind of free up my time to not focus on the micro interaction of a drop down or the radius of something. And I could take that time and use it to, be creative and innovate elsewhere.
I love that you've kind of clarified that yes, upfront might be a lot of component design and focusing on the product, but that's just the start of it. And once you get past that, there's other things that you will start to focus on and emphasize. So great. Thank you for debunking some of those myths. A lot here that we've unpacked on design systems. So thinking about the future now, a lot of things here. This is a multi question, but thinking in terms of your design system future, how do you keep up with changing design trends and emerging technologies? And like, what is the impact of emerging technologies on your design system? Like, does AI have a place in the work that you're doing? Is that something you're even considering right now? What does the
Yeah.
future look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Technology and trends and things change fast. And I think we're all moving in a direction where design systems um, and just technology in general is allowing the gap between designers and developers to slowly just move closer together, which I think is great. We're becoming two teams who can really in the diagram of responsibilities kind of cross over and speak each other's languages, and that ultimately improves efficiency. So um, I think it's a great trend that we're moving towards. I love what I'm seeing. It's unavoidable to talk about AI, right? It's the new hotness. And I think I'm very optimistic about it. I think at minimum it will AI and machine learning is going to help us eliminate a lot of these repetitive tasks, or, documentation is a big one, right? Like that could be daunting. There's a lot to think through, but if we can leverage AI and the open source systems that are out there to help inform what we're working on, it's really going to, again, eliminate that cognitive load of thinking and spending time on that and free us up to, work less on the maintenance, but more on the creativity aspect of pushing our design system forward.
I love to get everyone's perspective on AI. Everyone has such different thoughts on how it might propel the industry, but I agree there. I love this idea that it can help us facilitate faster work, especially in terms of repetitive things, but it's not going to replace the role of a designer or the thinking that goes behind a lot of the work that we do. So, fully agree there. And I know we've unpacked a lot today. Before I wrap things up, I did want to ask if you could travel back in time to give yourself some past advice when you started your design system journey or your career in general. What advice would you give yourself?
Yeah. I mean, that's a great question. And I think I could sum it up as like, don't be afraid of failure. And that could apply at a micro and a macro level, to young James starting out his career. The thought of doing something new or putting yourself out there or trying something that you may not be good at. Product design, making that switch from graphic to product design, design systems, not knowing much about it. Like, what does that mean to explore that? Um, if you're afraid of making that step, that change, I think you're missing out on countless opportunities. And being afraid of failure takes away the opportunity to grow and learn. I think a huge phrase that I've really been working on repeating to myself lately is there's no failure, only feedback. And that's something that has definitely helped me put a lot into perspective and switch that failure fear into growth and opportunity.
That's fantastic advice. I've never heard that one before, and I'm definitely gonna put that on a post-it for myself.
I love it.
Um, James, so I know we spoke a lot about design systems today. I'm sure we barely scratched the surface, and we probably could have gone another hour talking about things. But to wrap things up, we like to have what we call a majestic bite to be our key takeaway from today's conversation. What would your majestic bite be from our chat today?
Yeah, I think in summary, a design system in any iteration for an enterprise or to a small startup or a contractor is essential to a successful outcome in business and organization, and in many cases something that already exists at a level in your workflow. And I think that's key to kind of understand is there's something that you can build on and work on to improve, and it will grow organically as you champion it and nurture it into something that you aspire for it to be. So start small. Don't be overwhelmed by the scope and the scale. Stay hungry, and it's an iterative process, and continue to be that champion and ally for that along the way so that, it can take root and you can see it grow.
That is a fantastic bite. If people want to go to find out more about you or your company online, is there anywhere we can send them to?
Yeah. For Vagaro, if you want to learn more about what we do as a business solution software, you can go to vagaro.com/pro, PRO. If you want to browse the marketplace and book your next haircut or fitness class, you can visit vagaro.com. And then if you are interested in learning more about design systems or want to connect with me, you know, my LinkedIn is, linkedin.com/in/James Smet, SMET, or check out my website at jamessmet.com.
Awesome. And we'll link out to all of that in our resources. But James, it was amazing having you on the show today. Thanks for your time and all your insight.
Thank you. It's been a privilege to talk to you. Thanks again.